It's an early, crisp winter's morn in 2019 as I record this. And this year, 2019, it's the 40th year, the 40th anniversary of the TGO Challenge, an organised hiking event to increase the fellowship amongst backpackers, which takes place in the May of each year from the west coast to the east coast of Scotland, organised by TGO Magazine. In 2018, it was my 10th crossing. Yes, 2,000 miles almost, hiking across Scotland in all weathers, in all routes and all experiences with completely different people you meet along the way. In this video, I'm going to show you my 2018 route, the people I met along the way, and certainly some of the scenes and views that you might experience if you tried to do the TGO Challenge. Yes, this is all about the 2018 journey I undertook. Obviously, it's 2019 as I record this. It's been obviously a fair while since I've been back, and it's already becoming a distant memory. In fact, the 2019 team will, I suppose, be heading off in about 3 or 4 months' time. So if you're a fan of this event or you're interested in this event and would like to know more, let's just flip over to the Outdoor Station website, where there is a massive library of some 50 odd recordings and videos from previous TGO challenges. If you just go to the search box there and type it in, you'll see, well, 20 odd pages there. That is the most recent 7-part series, but I think I've recorded about 5 or 6 podcast series, and there's probably about 6 or 7 videos that are all related to the event. So on this particular day, obviously it was day 1, I had been up in Skye. If you've been watching the previous videos, you'll know that I was up in Skye for the previous week in terrible weather conditions. However, everything looked absolutely glorious in the rest of the country. So I was looking forward to getting down to Shield Bridge, which is just a couple of bus stops away from Skye, to join everybody and start the adventure. So let's just have a look at the map. So here we are at Kintail Lodge, a lovely part of the world overlooking the loch there. In fact, if you want to see the view, how about that? Look at that. That's the view from that part of the road there, looking straight out into the loch. And behind the Shield Bridge area, then you go up into the 5 Sisters of Kintail, the 5 Munros at the top there, which would have been magnificent, except on that particular day, 45 mile an hour winds were forecast, and it was certainly blowing a hoolie down in the valleys. And the few people that did go high on that first day, I understand, did experience quite serious weather conditions. So as far as I was concerned, I took the foul weather route, which is a nice, easy walk. Obviously, I was fairly warmed up, as you can imagine, from spending a week in Skye. So there wasn't that desperation that you'll see in the video of people wanting to get away from the Kintail Lodge Hotel, where they had to sign out and get cracking on the route. But we all soon dispersed and spread out. And as the day progressed and we got down to the main glen there, we started walking along. And this is where I met a gentleman by the name of Vitalis Hirschman, who was a Swiss guy from, well, obviously from Switzerland, but he was a photographer. And in fact, if you want to see some fantastic recordings of the event from a photography point of view on 2018, have a look at Vitalis's website, which is thisisnot.photography. And if you have a look at his blog post there, you'll see his recording of the challenge 2018, how he prepared for it, some of the things he went through, and he's obviously a very enthusiastic backpacker, and there's lots of hints and tips there relating to his experience. So that too is another great source of information. But back to the map, nothing much to say apart from the weather was really, really blowy, so we stayed low. This is where it starts to climb and head up to the top of the fords there, and there's another bothy along here somewhere, Camban bothy. Just stuck my head round the door, and there were a good handful of challengers there having a bit of a break, and everyone basically was heading towards Altbeath YHA, the Scottish Youth Hostel Association YHA, the most remote hostel in the whole country apparently, and many people, in fact the place was fully booked, so everybody had booked there. You can camp nearby, but you have to be very careful, or very touchy about the camping at Altbeath. But the weather by this time now had just started to get a bit dull and grey. The wind was still blowing. As you'll see on the video, the weather was creeping in, as they say, and things were getting a bit worse. And so, whoops, a bit too much to zoom in there. And so we continued, I continued with Vitalis and met a few others as well, as we headed down to the end of Glen Affric, to a nice area here, which is where we camped, and you'll see that was a lovely spot. Now, what I will say, if you're looking at this and thinking about your particular route this year, what I will say is to, although this is the obvious place we camped, as you'll see in the video, in actual fact, another 10 or 15 minutes walk will take you to this jetty here. And in the morning, the following morning, when we set off for the jetty, set off and walked past the jetty, there were a handful of tents camping there, and it was a magnificent morning as well. So it would be a beautiful place to camp, weather permitting, of course. Anyway, let's run the video and see what you think about the first day. Well, let's have a quick look at the details. Call that up. We're looking at about 23 kilometres, which is about a 15-mile mark. Not the greatest climbs, total ascent only 500 odd metres, so nothing heroic there, but just a nice gentle walk and start to the event. Anyway, here's the video. Well, as you can see, a miserable end to the day, but it was a changeable day, and certainly low down, as you saw from the video there, the weather was not brilliant, but on the tops I understood it was really, really horrendous. So I was quite glad I didn't go up there. I felt a bit of a chicken, to be honest, initially, but when I spoke to people afterwards, I was glad I was not up there on that particular route. So discretion's a better part of valour, as they say. Right, so after camping at the fords of Aviemore, let's have a look at that. I then started walking. Vitalis went off in one particular direction. I started walking with Tim Meredith, and Medforth, and we headed towards the infamous place called Coogie Lodge. And those of you that spend time on the notice board, the TGO Challenge notice board, and speak to others will know that Coogie has an interesting reputation for people and looking after the challengers. Generally, they don't it's not a public place, it's a private home that sort of opens its doors to challengers and serves copious amounts of tea and bacon sandwiches and lots of other things as well. But read the notice board for more details about Coogie. The route to Coogie is fairly straightforward, nice Land Rover track until you get to here, where you have to cut off the track and follow the side of this river. Now, it's actually better than the last time I went up there. The last time I went up there probably was about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was really boggy all the way. But in fact, the boggy section was just this small area here in the middle, where you can see the mouse there. And that just takes a little bit of navigation to understand you're going due east rather than continuing north, because it's easy to get misplaced in the woods. And then once again, you're back on a Land Rover track, which made for very easy walking. And I have to say, this is, as I say, my 10th crossing, and a lot of the places that I have been to over previous years, now it's amazing to see how much the tracks have been widened and strengthened and more established naturally as more people use them, I guess, and more industrial work takes place in the Forestry Commission. So anyway, the track follows you and literally takes you to the door at Coogie, the den of iniquity that is Coogie. You'll see a little clip of some other challengers walking towards it as we walk away. And we stopped there for a bacon sandwich, a cup of tea and a bit of a chat, and met up with a couple of other people. And then within half an hour or so, once again, we'd all gone our separate ways, which is the way of the challenge. Now, I left Tim. Tim continued round here somewhere and went off sort of northeast, but I continued up the Glen to camp not very far away. It was a very, very short day for me. The reason for that was I was actually aiming to meet Lee and Tony, Lee Wells and Tony Bow, the following day. So I had staggered my starts, as it were, to make sure I could meet them where I intended, which actually meant for 2 short days after a good start. So I camped up here just below Monadhliath, or just beneath it rather, on what turned out to be a gloriously sunny, sunny afternoon, and I sunbathed naked, expecting somebody to come along at any time. Nobody passed me by for the 4 or 5 hours I was out there in the sunshine. So I washed, I cooked, I ate, I read my Kindle, I did numerous things like this, and just wasted the afternoon away. It was really nice. But in all honesty, I think I was probably still tired from the Skye experience. So I was looking forward to the rest, and I enjoyed the rest there in my nice big Lux Hex Peak F6, which was a copious amounts of space. In fact, it was so big on the challenge that people were calling it the marquee. Anyway, let's run the video and see what you think about that particular day. Well, as you can see, another glorious day, and it was a lovely afternoon to be sitting there relaxing. So I wasn't in a hurry, and as it happens, I think that was a 14k day, and the day 3, this particular day we're talking about now, that was another 14k, so not particularly big days and big mileage. Let's pick us up from where we camped. The track's reasonably well established, turns into a footpath as opposed to a Land Rover path, and then from this point onwards it starts to get a little bit boggy, but fairly easy to find a way across. Now I chose to go to the top of this rise here, which I think in the video you might see as a fenced off area with trees in it, dense trees. There was a gate just here where the mouse is. I don't know if you can see that. There was a gate there that indicated that you might have gone through there and possibly picked up this path. But the closer I looked at it, I didn't feel the confidence that the path was still there. So I chose to come down the fence line and straight across the river, which just waded straight across. It wasn't particularly deep, and then just continued along the Land Rover track here. Down to the road. Now, following this track down to Siancroc Lodge, I met a couple of challengers by this weir who didn't particularly want to socialise very much by the looks of it, so I crossed over the bridge there. Now, this is an old road here that goes round and appears to join the A road here, as you can see from the pink line there. Now, in fact, it was a closed-off road. In other words, it was a road, and now it's just fenced-off area with a lot of fallen trees on it. And when I got to the very end, it appeared that it was just really high deer fencing, and I would have to turn around and turn all the way back again to come out where I should have done, right at the very bottom down here. However, it's an optical illusion, and although I haven't got a picture of it, actually, if you went to the very end of the fence, there was a narrow enough gap there to slide through with a rucksack, climb over the stone wall that was there, and I was onto the main road. On the main road, I turned down to this area here where you can see the line and the mouses. I went onto Google Maps so I could show you this, but in fact the area has completely changed. It's now been really built up from the power line, people that obviously run this power line through there, whichever service it is, and it's a multi-tiered area of lots of different routes to find your way through. But thankfully the GPS really helped on Route Buddy. The GPS helped me find the correct track that I was heading for, which is this one. There was about half a dozen tracks all spinning off from this power station, and once I got on there it was just a steady climb up to Essenban Waterfalls. Now, it all looked very good on the map. As Lee often says, all the camping always looks good when you're looking at the map, and this is very true. I mean, that looks to me like a very nice area, a nice big, well, a good sized stream coming through, not quite a river, but certainly plenty big enough, waterfalls, undulating ground. It should be flat enough, should be ideal for camping. In actual fact, it proved to be the exact opposite. It was really, really difficult to find a camping spot. And you'll see me, I sort of pan around the area, but then when Lee and Tony turned up, which they eventually turned up, of course, they struggled to find a spot as well. So as much as it looked great on the map, it just goes to show you that sometimes these things aren't as good as they initially appear. Right, so let's get back to a bit of video, and so you can see what the day actually consisted of and how it unfolded.
Water dripping through the leaves, I can't sleep. Water lapping at the bank, I can't thank you enough. Wind blowing through the birch, searching high and low. Wind
And as you can see, we were treated to a glorious sunset that night when Lee and Tony finally turned up. But as I say, they struggled to find a decent pitch there as well. So just one of those things. It always looks good on the map. Now, talking of which, I thought I might just recap the route so far, further away as it were, so people can get more of an idea the route that I took from Shield Bridge. So there you go, Shield Bridge through to the first camping spot there. Second day, Coogie's up here, and then I camped somewhere down here somewhere. And then the third day took me through to Essenban Falls. Let's just zoom in again. Got lost. There we go. So we're now picking up on day 4. Now, day 4 also was another short day, not very far from here to Fort Augustus. But I just wanted to talk about one thing in particular on this particular day. So let's just zoom in. Nothing spectacular to see, as I say. We made our way from Essenban Falls and picked up the track, no problem at all, came through the woods, etc., etc. And then we got into this open ground while we headed across, directly across really, for the gap in the trees. Whoops, zoom back out again. The gap in the trees here that would take us through to the power line, and we assumed another track. Now, what I do want to talk about is bogs. What became apparent during this particular challenge is that people from Europe, certainly UK, Wales and Ireland and Scotland, know what a bog is and how to, should we say, be cautious about a bog. Now, what I want to do is just show you some pictures. Now, when I'm talking about bogs, we're talking about peat bogs, peat hags, and well, water bogs as well. And an experience that some Americans had on the, I think it was the second or third day. So this might be your typical view from a hillside in Scotland, and you can see the watery area there. So you would expect that to be muddy and boggy. As you start to approach the peat hags, you can find that actually sometimes they're really quite deep. Now, depending on the weather and on how well the drainage has been on that particular area, sometimes the hags are just sticky mud, and sometimes they are just a bit wet. And sometimes they are exceedingly wet, but they look solid. So you have to treat them with a certain amount of caution. And when you approach them, this is where walking poles start to really come into their own. You can test the ground before you put your weight on it. You can test those little tufts that you can see in that bottom right-hand corner there and see if that's solid or it's floating, or you can use the poles and it'll help you jump across. Now, there's a couple of walking poles there to give you an idea that these peat hags and peat bogs can be really deep, and that's just a small one. They can be they can take you 3 or 4 minutes to climb down and climb back up out again. So you can look across the landscape, and the landscape can look relatively flat, few lumps, then you see this. So what we're saying is basically, with bogs, treat them with a certain amount of respect and caution. Now, on a good day, on a sunny day like this, when it's dried out, if you look into a muddy bog and you see where the deer have walked and the deer haven't sunk into it, the chances are it's good enough to walk across, but always test with the pole. However, on a day like that, where it's really wet and miserable and it's pouring and this boggy area is just an extension of the river or whatever, treat it very, very carefully, because once you're in it, it's not easy to get out, which these people found in the 2018 crossing. They were merrily striding along, thought it was a shallow puddle, stepped into it, and as you can see, most of them went up to their waist, if not more, in unpleasant boggy water. Now, that was majority water as opposed to mud, and they all found it very, very funny, which is part of the course. A gang of guys together, you tend to find these things funny. However, I've been in situations and come across people who've fallen into a bog like that when they've been on their own and they can't get out, purely because they're sucked in, their boots are sucked into the mud at the bottom and their rucksack is holding them down. and they're struggling to get out. So when you're crossing Scotland, anywhere really, but if you're on the TGO and you're on your own, and perhaps you're from overseas and you've not experienced it before, use your walking pole, test the ground, test the bog as it were, and see if it's stable to walk across. There's nothing to be scared of, just got to be cautious. Anyway, let's go back to the map. Once we made our way across here, which was very boggy, undulating sort of ground, we found our way onto the power line track here, and then meandered our way down to Fort Augustus. The guys, Lee and Tony, were booked into some glorious hotel. They tend to book up very early. They're clever, these guys. That's the one thing about accommodation in Scotland. Book early where you can. And I had booked into Monadhliath Lodge, which is like the local hostel, which actually was excellent. It was really good. They even did a breakfast service as well, which was a basic breakfast, but it was still better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, as they say. And I then continued into Fort Augustus to pick the guys up, and on the way dropped into the shops and picked up some munchies before our big day to head up Glen Doe. So let's show this video clip and show you what actually happened on this pretty uneventful day, really. Well, a pretty pleasant day's walking, and Fort Augustus is usually the first flesh pot, where challengers start bumping into each other and start cementing the friendships they've made in the previous days as they're walking together on and off and meeting up occasionally. And after Fort Augustus, you tend to meet up again in clusters, which makes for the whole social part of the event. So, of course, we had a good night in Fort Augustus. And the following day, it was a big day across Glen Doe, somewhere we've been before, Tony, Lee and I had passed as well a few times over Glen Doe with Rose, my wife. And it was a day that really depressed the group that found ourselves walking together. Glen Doe has been decimated, is the only word I could use really, and turned into a huge expanse of wind turbines. Just purely the route that we took, I counted over 100 wind turbines. And you have to imagine that this was once a wild area. that has been commercially turned into a motorway. When I last went up there 2 or 3 years back, the tracks that you'll see in the video were just one vehicle width tracks. Now they're huge, great juggernauts carrying cement and hardcore and whatever else they have to carry to obviously implement the foundations for wind turbines. And all of us, without fail, got to Chalybeate Springs very depressed. And just couldn't believe how much it had changed just in a couple of years. What we also found, if you're thinking of heading that way to Chalybeate Springs, is that 2018 was the last year that you will find Chalybeate Springs. From 2019 onwards, I think there was a plan for another 15 wind turbines to completely surround it. So what once was a remote, charming, romantic, desolate, wild space is probably going to be covered in concrete 2019 onwards. So if you're going that way this year or later, if you see this video, then I wish you the best of luck. Let's just have a quick look at the map to see where we are and everything. What else had changed? The other thing that changed from Fort Augustus, which was quite nice actually, originally the track from Fort Augustus was along the B road, and at times it was quite dangerous along this B road because you had to walk up this hill here, all the way around here to the main entrance to the works, the dam works. But there was a dam first, and then now it's obviously been added to with the wind turbines. But since then, they've actually put a path which takes you away from the road down by Loch Ness, which is a lovely place to stop and ponder for a minute. And in fact, I'd heard a few people had camped down by Loch Ness because all the accommodation was taken in Fort Augustus. Apparently there were various big events going on. There was a triathlon, there was a wedding, there was a few other things taking place, and all the accommodation was fully booked. So one of the reasons Lee and Tony did the wise thing and booked early. But anyway, this new path takes you, as you probably see a couple of clips on it on the video, takes you away from the road, and then it sort of cuts through the hills here, which is quite pleasant, before actually dropping onto the established service track that goes up to the dam. Now, it's a fairly steady climb. Glen Doe, I've been up there, 3 or 4 times now. It's always cold. It's incredibly windy. A few times I've been up there and it's been 10 foot of snow. Other times it's been, like you'll see on this video, perfectly clear. It's just the way it goes. But it's a steady climb. It's well worth the effort. And there is, on a good day, some magnificent views when you get to the top. Now, where are we? Here is the top here. So there's the reservoir. Now, I think one of the first video clips I take from here, this little indication of a few buildings. This is now a complete village, a workers' village. There's a helipad here, and this map is probably, I'd say, a couple of years old now, thinking about it. And as you continue along here, this whole area, as you'll see, is completely covered in wind turbines. And it's not a pretty sight if you're a lover of the great outdoors. But once again, it's heavy going in the weather. It's pretty vicious up there. It is very, very windy, so you can see why they put the wind turbines there. They're certainly not going to be short of a breeze or two. And I think the other helipad is around here somewhere, and there's another village and all the cement works and the other industrial buildings that are required to keep such maintenance going and the vehicles maintained is all dotted around there as well. So there's a few clips of that. Anyway, as I say, there's Chalybeate Springs, which, as you can see, used to be a confluence between 2 or 3 streams there, and nicely tucked just down there in a dip, nicely tucked out of the way of the Monadhliath, really, before you start heading across the Monadhliath proper, as it were. And having camped there once before, it is completely different. But you've been warned. You know what it's going to be like. You'll see the video clips, and perhaps that will give you an indication. Let's just see what it's a 24-kilometre day, so what's that? It's probably about 15 miles. A climb of 930 metres was that particular day. Anyway, let's run the video and see what you think. I think it starts with the scenes of the footpath which takes you by Loch Ness before it starts to climb. So as you can see, a depressing day's walking through that. It was literally mile after mile of development. And combined with obviously the items you saw there, they'd also dammed lots of streams and dug culverts and diverted rivers, and yeah, it was heartbreaking to see, especially when you'd seen it before it was like that. But anyway, let's get back to the business in hand. Of course, now we had to navigate ourselves across the notorious Monadhliath to get down to the, where are we going? River Dolnain, I think we were going. Yeah, River Dolnain. The Monadhliath, if you haven't experienced that before, is a navigational challenge. And between the three of us, we had, 3 GPSs, three watches with altimeters, compasses and maps galore, and we still managed to not take a straight line across the Monadhliath. It's just the way it is. If you have a look at the area underfoot, it seems so straightforward. I just wanted to go virtually due east. But if you can read contours well, you'll see that there isn't a lot of discerning ridges or defining marks or handrails for map reading to actually reach a particular spot. All this sort of a ridge here looked very, very similar, and we found ourselves sort of zigzagging across here before we eventually all agreed where we were and the fact we could actually get to Ben Odar. And once we were happy, we got to this cairn here and then to Ben Odar, everything was right with the world. But once again, the going wasn't too bad underfoot, bit boggy in places, a few steep drops which had to be navigated with caution as we started to head across this boulder field here down towards the river. If I zoom out to get more of a feel for the actual route that we took. There you go. So Charlie Beach Springs is here on the left-hand side, and we were heading this direction. So that gives you more of a feel for it. I don't think there was anything else to add to that. Let's just zoom back in again. Where are we? So now, people have been before will know Hagrid's house, as we call it, which is down by this stream. There's a bothy and a, there we go, just here at the bottom of these grouse butts. Just there, there's a worker's bothy, if you like, and a guest's bothy, presumably for people who are shooting in the area. And normally the way people tend to get to it is along here, along this little stream up to this top part and down there. So we decided to come from the south this time, which made things a bit more interesting. We did intend to camp there, but decided to head further along and keep going, keep pushing on, because an early start the following day would allow us to get into Aviemore at a reasonable time. And you could tell from the way the weather was going, it was going to be a cold night. So we continued round the confluence of the stream here. And I had been down here, a couple of years previously, and I was amazed at just how different the stream had become with the wear and tear from the weather, and obviously snow affecting the banks. So there were a few very, very steep climbs up banks, which were quite sheer and covered in bracken, which if you'd slipped, there was an awful lot to stop you going over the edge. But we made it, no problem at all, and camped down here by the sheepfold for what turned out to be a very, very cold night. Anyway, let's have a look at the video. Well, as you can see, another very pleasant day's walking. Beautiful blue skies, lots of sunshine, but a very cold breeze. Perfect walking conditions, really, in many ways. You can also see what the landscape was like to try and navigate across. There's very, very little, very few identifiable markings or peaks or whatever to use as a reference point. But still, that's all part of the TGO Challenge fun. Well, the following day, after a good night's sleep, and I certainly had plenty of space in the old Hex Peak, the guys in their notches, they're very happy with their notches, very lightweight shelter, but you do have to pitch it exactly where you want to sleep because you don't have a choice if there's a lump underneath, whereas I felt like I was definitely in a marquee. But a cold night. We got down, it was a late finish the previous day, and we decided to get off early this particular day. I think we started at 7 o'clock, so I was up at probably 5:30, 6 o'clock or whatever, starting to get something to get some food going, and certainly needed it. It was, as you'll see in the video, plenty of ice on the tent. But we took a favourite route, which is, we continued along here down to the confluence where the Dolnane meets, what does it meet actually, thinking about it? Here, it meets the, well, Firth Lynn. There's a little confluence there, and what we did, we stopped, you'll see in the video, we stopped and we pitched the tents because they were soaking wet from the ice and the previous night's weather, obviously. So we had a rest there before charging up this steady, steep climb. Now, what this does, let me just zoom out and I'll show you this. What this does is bypass the boring section of the Braemar Road. Now, the Braemar Road, let's go a bit further, is here. Is this particular track there that comes from, I think they call it, is it the Red Bothy? There's a crossing here. A lot of people tend to come this way and cross over and then start walking up here. Now, it is a long, it's just mentally boring. It's a long, boring route to walk up here to the top section of the Braemar Road. And this would have been the original intention, but I went this way with Rose a couple of years back, recommended it to the guys, and since then they've enjoyed the walk. And it's a really pleasant walk, actually. Steep climb, steep pull to get going to the top of here, but once you're at the top, just a couple of, I think they're Munros to pop across, Gilcharn Beg and Gilcharn Moor. Lovely walking across there, glorious sunshine with just the crispy crunch of the bracken and the, what was it, moss probably, underfoot. Met a couple of people up there, took a nice picture for us. And then we dropped down onto the Braemar Road for basically the long, long, long descent down into Aviemore. And once down in Aviemore, we went to the favourite place, the Cairngorm Hotel, who have looked after us, us as in Tony, me, Lee, and many other challengers over the years. And they look after us really well, and very warm welcome. They don't mind what state you are when you come in, which is really useful sometimes when you've been in a bit of a boggy mess. But they were really good. Cairngorm Hotel, and obviously in Aviemore, everybody gets their parcels sent ahead, and they top up with goodies, load the rucksacks up, party too much in Aviemore and regret it the following day. But that is another story. Anyway, let's run the video of that particular day's walking, starting with that cold morning. And it was good to catch up with friends at the Cairngorm Hotel. There was Heather there you saw, who we'll be talking about a bit later on. She joined us for on and off for the last few days. A 22k walk to get into Aviemore, about 13 miles. As you saw, lovely bit of walking, and certainly you feel like you're on top of the world when you're on the top of those two Munros. You've got a fantastic view if the weather's on your side, and certainly you definitely getting the best views, some of the best views in Scotland. But anyway, let's now go back to having a look at the map. It was a long day this particular day. We had planned to do Ben Macdui on the way, but of course, as I say, when you're planning and at home, things seem so much easier than if you've had a busy night in the Cairngorm Hotel and you've just filled up your rucksack with all sorts of goodies and your food parcel. So the enthusiasm had waned somewhat, as is the case. So the Ben Macdui idea did go slightly to the wall. So we took the lower route, the Lairig. Now, if you're coming this way for the first time, don't be tempted to camp at the Cairngorm footbridge. Should that be part of your route? What have I lost? I think I've lost it, haven't I? Gone a bit too far. Yeah, it's Cairngorm footbridge down here somewhere. No, it's not. Where are we? There it is there, sorry. Cairngorm Club footbridge there. Yes, just as a bit of advice, really, it's not particularly great camping. A really, really, really good camp spot is just here. You'll see that on the video. There's a part where I pan round from a path round to this lovely little bend in the river there, and that is some lovely camping. Lee and I camped there, I think, a few years back, and a few people I know make that as their main spot coming out of Aviemore if they don't decide to stay in Aviemore. Anyway, we continued. Obviously, the Lairig has its own reputation. Very, very steep-sided boulder field that is strewn for about 7 or 8 kilometres. Probably about 3 to 5 miles of boulders, which, depending on the weather conditions when you cross it, can be challenging. Our crossing this particular time, the weather was good, view was good, there was no snow to worry about, but when it's sort of a bit snowy as opposed to deep snow, getting across these boulders can be tricky. Now, Tony had a slip. I think he didn't break his pole, but he almost broke his pole. These boulders can be anything up to 10 feet in diameter. Generally, the majority of the route takes you across boulders which are probably only 2 or 3 feet in diameter, but of course they can move, and when they move underneath your feet, it tends to be a bit unnerving because there is no level ground around you to place your poles and land. So you have to watch your footing as you go across the Lairig. But for all that, take it steady, there's no rush, and you'll be fine. But that particular day, we did the Lairig. Now, one interesting little thing you'll see on the video is we came across a grouse that was sitting on her eggs right in the middle of the path. And to be honest, you'll see from the camouflage, you wouldn't have seen her there. It was just, I think it was Lee, who was the eagle-eyed one right at the very front of us, that spotted it and managed to deviate slightly. And we all had to look 3 or 4 times to see this bird that was nesting on the path. Stupid animal. And then we continued all the way along, past Ghru, which is was quite popular actually at the time. There seemed to be quite a few people camping in and around Ghru, not challengers necessarily, just people on the day out from Braemar, I guess. And then we continued down to Derry Lodge, of course, which is the well-known spot that people head to. Again, that has some lovely camping, but I think as we were there, let me just go back to the map, as we were there, there was a Duke of Edinburgh group there. There were a handful of other people camping in sort of social groups, and I think off the top of my head there's probably about 7 or 8 challengers. But that's where we bumped into, that's where we bumped into Heather again. And she was quite happily sitting ensconced in her tent, watching the sun go down, drinking hot chocolate while we were actually very tired. I think it was a 24-kilometre day, yeah, 17.5 miles. That was a good enough day after a good night at the Cairngorm Hotel. Anyway, let's run the video and you can enjoy the experience too. Well, I do hope you've noticed in these videos that the hex peak is pitched long before the 2 notches were pitched. Just thought I'd mention that. Even though it's a bigger shelter, it seems to go up a lot faster because the guys were always fiddling and just adjusting and fiddling on the notch. Not that I'm saying it's a bad shelter, I'm just saying they seem to take their time. And of course, the conversation you have with friends as you do this particular walk, there's a lot of conversation about gear and equipment and observations of what people are doing and how they're using their equipment as well. And rucksacks, you'll see that Lee and Tony were using, one was using a recent model of the Mariposa, one was using the slightly older model of the Mariposa, the Dyneema one, and I was using the Gregory Optic, all of which performed exceedingly well and proved to be ideal rucksacks for the challenge. But let's get back to the next day, which was basically a saunter, day 9 saunter into Braemar. The previous day was 28 kilometres, that's 17 and a half miles. This one was just, well, half that really, 14 kilometres, 9 miles. And basically you come out of Derry Lodge on the established track and go down to Mar Lodge. Now, Mar Lodge is an estate house. They have a lot of weddings there, and it's sort of the centre of operations for a lot of that particular estate on the outskirts of Inverie, on the outskirts of Braemar. And I believe the Gilly, or one of the Gillies, was getting married that particular day as well, but they still shoehorned us into the tea room they've got there, a big sort of just gathering room, and there was lots of free tea and coffee, which was very generous of the people at Mar Lodge. They sometimes do accommodation. I'm not too sure if they've stopped that now or it was because of the wedding, but again, check the TGO Challenge notice board if you're going that way, because they used to do accommodation, and I believe they sometimes let you pitch there as well. And the accommodation is absolutely sumptuous, I'm told. The baths are deep enough to swim in, and the food is fabulous. So I do hope that continues. But anyway, we stopped for a cup of tea there. You'll see the video of a handful of challengers in that particular room. We continue to Victoria Bridge, and then it's a bit of a trawl, I think about a 4-mile trawl down this road, which actually isn't too busy, it's not too bad, into Braemar itself. Now, in Braemar, as I say, once again, there were several events, sporting events going on. There was a wedding, obviously, at the lodge taking place on the estate, and a lot of people were involved in that. So most of the accommodation, if not all the accommodation, was booked. However, the campsite at Braemar look very favourably upon the challengers and the challenge generally, and support us where they can. So although the campsite was fully booked, they found Heather and I and a handful of others a little spot just around by the playing area, the kids' play area, which was fantastic. So we had somewhere to obviously pitch up, dry our stuff out, and go and use the facilities, have a shower, etc., etc. But anyway, not a long day. The videos, if you notice, are getting shorter and shorter from each day because there's not an awful lot to show you. But yeah, this day was a fairly easy day. So the normal practice is to dive into Gordon's tea room and have at least 2 lunches, because we're all usually famished by that stage. And as you can see, the Five Arms Hotel in the centre of Braemar is still closed. I believe the opening date is this year, 2019. I seem to remember seeing a sign, but that must have been closed now for 5 or 6 years. So goodness knows what the hotel will be like once it's finished. They've obviously spent a lot of time and a lot of money doing that up. And as I say, we went down to the campsite, which is just a short walk on the edge of town, before joining everybody in the Invercold Hotel for a few drinks in the evening and I believe a meal or 2. Now, the following day, the forecast was for 50-mile-an-hour winds on the tops. And it was a strange day. It started off okay, as you'll see in the video, just overcast and a sort of a normal sort of Scottish day. But as we got towards Lairig Lodge, the temperature dropped like a stone and it was really, really cold. There would be high winds, a burst of rain that was painful, that would actually be punishing your skin, and then it would stop and it would be glorious sunshine for 5 or 10 minutes and then it would start all over again. So it was a very strange day. So looking at the map, we obviously headed out to Lairig Lodge, which is another den of iniquity if you like that type of thing, where a lot of people sometimes stay over and camp there before either continuing the way we were going on Jocks Road or going over the top towards Glaselt Shield. So Lairig Lodge is there. You'll see a little clip of that in the video. The guys there are always very welcoming. There's always tea and coffee going, and a warm place to sit and chew the fat with lots of people you probably never see until the next challenge, which often is the case. But as I say, some people stay there and enjoy a good night socialising. Others continue on like us. So we continue to the end of Lairig. And you'll see by the little camp symbol there, that is actually where we ended up camping, right at the end before the steep climb in Jocks Road there to the top. There is an area which was sort of fairly well sheltered from the winds, although they did punish us a bit, I have to say. And on that particular occasion, I struggled to find a pitch spot big enough for the F6. That was the one time it sort of I struggled with it really to get it pitch taut, whereas the guys with their little notches and other sort of long narrow tents managed to slot in very nicely, but you'll see that in the video. We had originally intended to camp over at Loch Esk here, where you can see the camp symbol. If you ever consider it, don't. It's just a boggy mess. There was nothing there that we saw between us as we went past thinking that would be a nice place to pitch. Looks good on the map, but in reality, not a place worth heading to at all. So another short video clip really just taking us out of Braemar to this particular camp spot, and we basically all spent the afternoon just lying in our tents, reading books, listening to music, dozing, and just waiting for the wind to drop. So here it is. You know, sometimes you look back at these videos and you go, it doesn't look too bad. It looked fine there, didn't it? But it was a pretty horrendous, well, it wasn't, where we were, it wasn't horrendous, but it was unpleasant, but on the top it looked horrendous. Anyway, that changed our plans the following day, the route. We're all, Heather had joined us by this stage, and we were all six of one, half dozen the other, which way should we go? And we changed the route, all a bit dubious whether it would be good. In actual fact, it turned out to be an absolutely fantastic day's walking. Beautiful views. And one of the most interesting things which you'll see in the video, which if you've been to this area and you've done the challenge before, is actually looking down on Doe Loch and Glaselt Shiel and seeing it from a completely different perspective to the other side, which you would have come in had you taken the path I mentioned earlier on from Localita. So let's just have a look at, oh, no, not that. Let's just have a look. We'll come to that in a second. Let's just have a look at the map. There we go. Half one, half dozen the other. Right. So we got to the top of the climb, the Jocks Road there. As you can see, fairly cool, breezy day, or as you will see, fairly cool, breezy day, but lovely all the same. And then we hung a left here, or a left? Yeah, a left. And dropped down to the South Esk, crossed over the river, and then climbed back up again. And from this point onwards, it really started to get interesting. Now, here's Loch Mick, and Doe Loch's up there, and that's a path that some people take. And when you come to Glaselt Shiel here, where the bothy is, the other path that people tend to take comes down here. That's the path that leads directly across to Localita. So there's a couple of ways of getting there, but I had done those routes in previous years and often wondered what the view was like at the top of this ridge. And as you'll see in the video, it is absolutely magnificent. What a lovely day's walking. It was really good. It literally lifted our spirits from the few days beforehand at Glen Doe. And we continued our way quite happily down to the information centre at the Spittal of Glenmuck. What's down there? There is a toilet and there is a coffee machine if you've got the right change, and not much else. So don't expect very much down there. And then we took the standard path then that went up to the Sheelan of Mark Bothy. And as we finished the day, the weather did turn unpleasant, as in just not very nice at all, which spoilt the rest of the day really. But up until that point, it was absolutely fantastic. We all agreed we thoroughly enjoyed that walk, which was about 20k, 12.5 miles. Of course, all that area belongs to the Balmoral estate and the Queen, so we have to respect that and some of the wishes that you'll hear about if you do undertake the TGO challenge and some of the things they ask you to consider. Anyway, if I've got the video back at the right place, we'll start that again, and this is how the day unfolds. Let's just get this right. I've got it on the right day. That's the right day. Let's try this one. Here we go. So you can see there various people were camped outside the bothy, and I believe there were a few people inside the bothy. Sleeping in a bothy is a required experience, I think, at some stage during the TGO Challenge. I'm not a great fan. I find them actually colder than sleeping in a tent, and there's always vermin in a bothy somewhere, and I get paranoid about my food bag. But that's just me. I tend to prefer to sleep in my tent for my own space, and I've got copious amounts of space in the Hex Peak, so that was fabulous. But having said that, that particular night was the worst night of the whole trip, not because of being too cold or not having enough space, but unfortunately the ground underneath the tent was so lumpy with molehills I couldn't actually lie out flat at any stage, so I didn't have my best night there. But that's just being honest. Right, well, let's just nip back to the map. Now, as you'll see in the video, the weather in the morning was fairly thick mist. It had dropped down and greeted us when we woke up, and getting our way to Muckle Cairn proved to be a little bit trickier than we all anticipated. We all sort of set off and not really paying much attention because of being probably fairly tired, and it took us a while to find the right spot. But when we did, we found that the track is now really established at Muckle Cairn, and once you're on it, there's no problem at all dropping down to Glenshee. And Glenshee then is that nice gentle walk that takes you down to Tarfside, where the challenge organisers have taken over the hostel at Tarfside, and they look after the waifs and strafes and tend sore feet and look after people's enthusiasm. That's where you get to meet everybody that you've met casually on the way and hear about their different experiences and the trips that they had. It's a really good psychological boost if you're feeling low and you've got lots of blisters and just generally want a bit of TLC from people who have also shared the same experience. Of course, at this stage now, it really is downhill mentally. There's not very far to go. This is day 12. There's only a couple of days and you are at the end. You're probably at your fittest now and you're ready to keep going for another 2 weeks. That's just the way it goes. And by this stage, most people have already discussed their next route with others that they've met along the way. Perhaps people are more experienced or the people that enjoyed a particular route. And by the time they get to the very end, they've planned their next route. So that's Tarfside. And let us now join the little experience of walking away from a wet, misty morning at Shiel down to Tarfside. I forgot to mention that down in Tarfside, the village of Tarfside really welcome the challengers as they come through, and they let them use their sports field to camp on. And as you saw there, there's usually a good 50, 60 tents on there for 2 or 3 nights, as obviously different people arrive at different times. And they open the Mason's Arms, which is a Mason lodge in the village for the challengers, and we enjoy usually a very warm night in there, sometimes a bit of singing and a bit of frivolity in front of the roaring fire, and have a few drinks, which is really nice. As I say, it's the beginning of the end, and this is where friendships now are starting to be cemented for the next trip. The next time you visit Scotland and do the TGO, you'll be walking amongst friends. And so from this point onwards, as we leave Tarfside, most people at different stages get up after a good night at the Masons, head down to the retreat, which is again a local cafe which is run by the community. It belongs to the community, before then heading to Edzell and then North Water Bridge. That's the sort of traditional route. There are a couple of other routes that people can take away from the roads, if you like, away from Edzell, if you want to escape to the hills for one last night. But most people take this particular route. If we have a look at the map, and I'll just cover it. So there you have Tarfside, where you wake up with, there's a toilet at Tarfside, just for future reference, toilet and water as well, so you've got all the basics covered there. And then most people pop down to the hostel for a breakfast if they want a breakfast down there, or they head up to the retreat, which is just here. Hopefully you can see that. There you go, there's a retreat there, which is a sort of a museum and local information centre, as well as being a cafe. And then you generally just chew the fat, talk about your experience, get off the road about here, cross over the bridge and head down cultivated land, and watch the hills slowly retreat behind you as you get closer and closer and closer to humanity, which takes the form of Edzell. And in Edzell there is a cafe which everybody invades on the way through, next to a pub which quite a few people invade, and in fact that's where we left Lee and Tony while Heather and I headed and continued through Edzell after something to eat. Now there is, if you're looking at the challenge for the first time, or you may have done this, let me just explain something to you. I made the mistake the very first year I did it, which is I continued along this road to this B road here, and then walked the several kilometres along this B road, which is a very, very straight road, round to the North Water Bridge campsite there. It is incredibly dangerous, and naturally over the years it has got busier and busier as well. And because it's a straight road and the trees are slightly overhanging, a lot of car drivers can't see you. There is actually a route which takes you all through back driveways, paths, lanes, footpaths, people's access to their houses, which will divert you off that road for as long as possible. So if you're undertaking the challenge and you're going this way for the first time, seek some advice or join in with somebody who knows the way around. It does shave off a lot of concern, and you can actually enjoy a few hours walking as well. There's just a little kilometre down the road there before once again you're off the road onto a back lane, a back service road, which then runs past some very nice houses before coming down to Dovecote Farm and then into North Water Bridge. And this is what it looks like. I've been in North Water Bridge when the weather has been atrocious, when it's been absolutely glorious, really, really warm, and everybody's sitting out on the picnic benches enjoying a last supper, as it were, and times like this where it was just a bit chilly and everybody just arrived and basically went to sleep. But they, once again, very welcoming and look after you, and there's lovely hot showers there as well, which is always a bonus. As you start to return to humanity, of course, and head into the final day and all the thoughts about returning back to normality as you get to Montrose or somewhere on the east coast, whichever route you've chosen to take. Now, a lot of the times we've headed to St Cyrus, which is an established, if you like, easy finish from here, which is basically the path takes you to a cliff top, and there's a very, very steep zigzag path down to the beach, and then you're going to climb back up again, and then generally you catch the bus back into Montrose. But over the years, we've sort of modified that route and found a much nicer finish, which actually enables you to walk into Montrose, again with very, very little road walking. So if you just have a quick look at that now. So you come out of North Water Bridge as normal and head to Marykirk, cross over the big river bridge there, and head up to Morphy, and it's at Morphy where you make the change. If you're doing the St Cyrus finish, you normally head east here where the mouse is at the moment, and take this route across there and go over to St Cyrus, which is there, look, and then you get to the top of the cliff path, which is there. Which is, as I say, a bit of a drop, but also just to the nature of the beach. Actually, it's not possible to walk along the beach back down into Montrose because you've got this estuary here. So we have, over the years, modified it, come from Morphy, and rather than turn left, we've continued right, gone down this way, just a little bit of road walking over the bridge over the estuary there, and then take the path round the edge of the estuary, which leads you nicely down to the Links golf courses. The golf course is down here, and this is just basically walking through sort of dunes and trees as you meander your way down to the beach and the water. At this point, Heather and I headed down to the dunes. Tony and Lee carried on, and I'm not too sure if they actually finished anywhere or they just headed into Montrose. But as you'll see the video, Heather and I headed down to the dunes, paddled in the water before wandering down to Montrose, across the golf course, found a nice cafe just here where we sat and, well, it chewed the fat really, and just covered some of the high points and low points of the actual adventure. What we would change for next time, gear, of course, that's always a good conversation, and where we might start next time, should we do it next time, etc., etc. So that pretty well wraps up this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Do have a look at the outdoorstation.co.uk website. As I say, there's 50-odd podcasts covering the event, as well as probably half a dozen videos or more. This video I'm going to show you now concludes the video. It shows you the finish. Control, which is where the people, the organisers, if you like, of the challenge, keep an eye on you digitally or electronically or virtually, whatever, how you want to do it, and map your progress across the country to make sure that you are safe and well. They're not on your case all the time, but they do ask you to call in every 3 or 4 days, which is vital really, because the times that people haven't done it, they have actually instigated a search party, and 1 or 2 cases it was an emergency and had to be dealt with. So don't take that lightly. They're not breathing down your neck. They just like to make sure that you are progressing well, particularly if this is your first time, or if you're an overseas traveller that's doing Scotland for the first time and obviously getting to grips with its good points and bad points. So finally, we see Control, what goes on in Control, which is just a hotel room with some tea and coffee and a lot of people talking and remembering their previous 14 days before the final meal in the evening, which is a big celebration for everybody that has completed the challenge. And then in my case, I was given a plaque that every challenger who's completed 10 crossings gets. So my thanks to you for watching it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you actually undertake the challenge yourself at some stage, and maybe one day I'll meet you in Scotland. Bye for now.